Anglo-Saxon law is a body of written rules and customs that were in place during the Anglo-Saxon period in England, before the Norman conquest. This body of law, along with early Scandinavian law and Germanic law, descended from a family of ancient Germanic custom and legal thought. However, Anglo-Saxon law codes are distinct from other early Germanic legal statements, known as the leges barbarorum, in part because they were written in Anglo-Saxon, instead of in Latin. The laws of the Anglo-Saxons were the second in medieval Western Europe after those of the Irish to be expressed in a language other than Latin. Inked records of early Germanic law, leges barbarorum, were, in many ways, the product of Roman influence. Throughout the early Middle Ages, as various Teutonic, or Germanic, tribes on the continent came into closer and more peaceful contact with the highly institutionalized civilizations surrounding the Mediterranean, chiefly the Roman Empire, it was inevitable that they would be affected by the cultural influences emanating from the south. Many Germanic tribes and nations subsequently began to imitate the cultural and institutional facets of Roman civilization. Few of these imitations were so important, or had such a profound impact on the nature of barbarian life as the adoption of writing, a technology which spread throughout the Germanic kingdoms hand in hand with Christianity, a religion based on literacy. Up to this point, the laws, or customs, of the barbarian nations of Northern Europe were essentially oral. They were occasionally recited publicly, and relied for their continuation upon word of mouth, and the memory, perhaps capricious, of those whose burden it was to remember them. With writing, however, it was possible to set the ancient customs of the Northern Europeans into a lasting and more or less fixed form, using ink and parchment. It was a general trend among the Germanic tribes of Europe, that adaptation of the Roman system of writing was soon followed by the production of a national code of laws. It was inevitable, too, that in imitating the Roman practice of writing down law, facets of Roman law and jurisprudence would influence these new Germanic codes. The numerous legal and customary statements which make up the earliest written Germanic law codes from the continent are testament to the influences of Roman language and Roman law, as each was written in Latin, a foreign language, and was often significantly influenced by Emperor Justinian's great legal code. In Britain, the situation was somewhat different, as Rome had retreated from the island by about 400 AD, and the native inhabitants who remained were, for a time, left relatively free of foreign influence. When, in 597 AD, strong Roman influence again reached the island of Britain, by now in the hands of the Anglo-Saxons, it was in the form of Christianity, the practitioners of which brought with them the art of letters, writing, and literacy. It is significant that it was shortly after the arrival of the first evangelical mission in England, led by Augustine, and sent by Pope Gregory I, the first Anglo-Saxon law code appeared, issued by Ethelbert, King of Kent. The first 6 pronouncements of this code deal solely with sanctions against molesting the property of the Christian Church and its officers, notably demanding 12-fold compensation for stealing from God's house. In contrast, compensation for stealing from the king is set at only 9-fold. Writing in the 8th century, the Venerable Bede comments that King Ethelbert, beside all other benefits that he of wise policy bestowed upon his subjects, appointed them, with his council of wise men, judicial dooms according to the examples of the Romans. Exta exemplarum is the Latin phrase Bede uses here. The meaning of this statement has exercised the curiosity of historians for centuries. It was not, as with the continental Germanic tribes, that Ethelbert had the lording down in Latin; rather, without precedent, he used his own native language, Old English, to express the dooms, or laws and judgments, which had force in his kingdom. Some have speculated that according to the examples of the Romans simply meant that Ethelbert had decided to cast the law in writing, whereas previously it had always been a matter of unwritten tradition and custom, handed down through generations through oral transmission, and supplemented by the edicts of kings. As such, Ethelbert's law code constitutes an important break in the tradition of Anglo-Saxon law. The body of Kentish legal customs, or at least a portion of them, were now represented by a written statement, fixed, unchanging, no longer subject to the vagaries of memory. Law was now something that could be pointed to, and, significantly, disseminated with ease. Whatever were the exact motives for making oral law into written code, King Ethelbert's law code was the first of a long series of Anglo-Saxon law codes that would be published in England for the next 4.5 centuries. Almost without exception, every official version of royal law issued during the Anglo-Saxon period was written in Old English.